Hello everyone. Welcome to Tu Diep channel. Jame is still silent. He has not been able to make a final decision whether to leave or stay. Tu Diep is still lying there. Jame thinks more and more. He decides to leave but is tormented by his conscience with Tu Diep. It is really difficult to choose. Today we will continue this story. In a small, quiet room nestled deep within a remote farm, dim lamplight flickered over Diep's pale face. She lay still on the bed, her delicate body fragile, as if it might vanish at any moment. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her skin cold, and her eyes swollen shut from crying too much. Beside her, James sat in silence, holding her lifeless hand, his eyes staring into the void as if grappling with something far greater than fear. He didn't speak, not because he had nothing to say, but because everything inside him was too heavy to turn into words. The doctor had just left after the first checkup, leaving behind words that hit James like a cruel verdict. If Diep's high fever and eye swelling didn't improve soon, she could face permanent blindness. 80% chance. The doctor had said, cold, clinical, merciless. James couldn't speak then. He only nodded. But inside, something was breaking. Blindness? How could it be? Diep, who once told him that her eyes were her treasure, who loved painting, adored nature, and spent hours watching the sunset, might never see again. The doctor had asked if Diep had gone through anything emotionally distressing lately. James couldn't answer right away. He was too ashamed to admit the truth. Yes, there had been something more than sadness. It was a devastating emotional blow. Diep had recently heard a rumor that her biological parents, whom she believed to have died when she was a child, might still be alive. It wasn't hope that bloomed in her, it was shock, disbelief, confusion, and eventually collapse. She cried endlessly, alone. Her spirit cracked. And not long after, her body followed. That night, James would never forget it. He had tried calling her again and again, but she didn't pick up. It started to rain heavily, and a storm of panic rose in his chest. He rushed to the farm, where Diep was living alone. What he saw haunted him. She was collapsed by the gate, unconscious, soaked to the skin, lips turning blue. He picked her up, shaking, and brought her inside. He warmed her, changed her clothes, called the doctor, and didn't sleep a single minute. The doctor returned, prescribed medication, and gave instructions: check her temperature regularly, administer antibiotics, monitor the fever. James followed every instruction religiously. He bought a thermometer, sat by her side day and night, fed her medicine on schedule. He stopped eating, ignored his own needs, and kept his entire focus on her. Even when he had to make calls to manage the farm's operations, coordinate lumber production, reschedule harvests, his mind never left Diep's side. Later, Diep's adoptive mother arrived, bringing home cooked food, fruit, medicine. She checked her daughter, helped James care for her, and reassured him. The doctor said things were improving, that maybe tonight or tomorrow, Diep would wake up. James finally let out a quiet breath. But the storm inside him didn't ease. Because what terrified him more than blindness or illness was the pain Diep was carrying within. James remembered clearly how just a few days ago, when he noticed her growing weaker, he had told her to stay home from work. But she refused, pushing herself as always, trying to outrun her own thoughts. That night, when it started to rain and she didn't answer his calls, James panicked. By the time he reached her, she had already fallen. Her mother explained that Diep had been born malnourished and had always been fragile. Life had never been kind to her. Abandoned, overworked, neglected. The trauma she endured was not just physical. And now, this news, that her parents might still be alive, shook the very foundation of everything she believed. She was collapsing under the weight of that possibility. James couldn't help but think, if it were him, Could he have survived such pain? He blamed himself. He should have protected her. He should have been there. Not just in words or gestures, but truly present in her life. In her battles. In her loneliness. Yet he let work consume him. And now, she was lying here, trapped in a fevered sleep. And all he could do was watch. His silence wasn't indifference. It was grief. A grief that couldn't be spoken. His heart was screaming. But his lips couldn't move. He was terrified. Not just of losing her, but of being too late. He remembered what her mother said, if Diep wakes up, take her to find the truth. Help her discover whether her parents were really alive. She needed clarity. No matter how painful it might be. He didn't answer then. But he made a vow deep in his chest, if she wakes up, he will be there. He won't let her walk through it alone. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky had cleared. Inside, Diep's body had grown warmer. Her breathing steadier. Her eyelids fluttered faintly. As if she was beginning to hear the silent promise in James's heart. He still sat there. Still quiet. Still holding her hand. And in the quietest voice, perhaps only heard by his own soul, he whispered, Diep, please wake up. I'm here. And I will never let you go through the darkness alone again.